Harry once walked behind his mother's coffin while the entire world watched. But now, the darkest question surrounding his life is whether the marriage he built after Diana's death has become another trap he cannot escape. Because behind the polished photographs, the royal titles, the California mansion, and the carefully managed public image, a far more explosive story is being whispered. Harry and Meghan may not simply be drifting apart. The claim is that the financial, legal, and personal architecture of their marriage has been changing underneath them for years, and if the pieces finally collide, the fallout could be devastating.
They were divorced, let's put it that way. They were actually divorced. He moved back to England, unless, of course, she should marry some billionaire and waft off with him.
Enough of this bullshit. Just strip them of the titles, Meghan and Harry.
In America is that a divorce is on the card for 2025 or 2026. This marriage is in the celebrity death pool. They have been choked off of any and all information pertaining to the royals.
Before he married Meghan, he had the hail fellow, well-met, cheeky chappy act down pat.
Harry and Meghan Markle have been sacked again.
The tragedy is that Diana spent so much of her life trying to protect her son, yet nobody could have predicted that decades later, the greatest danger surrounding his future would allegedly come from the very marriage he chose. And by the time the public began noticing the strange gaps, the solo appearances, the separate projects, and the increasingly obvious distance, the machinery may already have been moving behind closed doors. That silence is where this story gets uncomfortable. Because what if the public separation was not the beginning of the problem, but merely the moment people finally noticed what had already been happening? Their supposed humanitarian mission was allegedly being reorganized, responsibilities were shifting, financial interests were becoming more complicated, and suddenly the fairy tale looked less like a permanent royal rebellion and more like two people quietly preparing for completely different futures. Then came the detail that made the gossip machine explode. In January 2026, Sunshine Sachs was reportedly brought back into Meghan's orbit. That name matters because this was not some random public relations company appearing out of nowhere. Sunshine Sachs had been connected to Meghan years earlier, before Harry, before palace life, before the royal title. So why return to an old chapter now? Why reach backward when the entire Sussex brand was supposedly built around moving forward? The timing is what makes people suspicious. Harry was making repeated trips to the United Kingdom while Meghan continued building her own projects and public identity in California.
We can maybe arrive at that. Sometimes Harry is happy to be there, and he's certainly happy to be irresponsible and walking around stoned out of his mind and throwing stones on the beach with the dogs and riding his bike with security following him.
And then comes the legal issue that could change the entire conversation. California's community property rules and the significance of the timing of a divorce filing. According to the claims repeated in this discussion, whoever files first could potentially shape the legal framework around the battle that follows. Then another date enters the conversation, 10 years of marriage. Commentators have repeatedly focused on that milestone and what it could mean financially. The claim being circulated is that after 10 years, the division of marital assets becomes especially significant under California law. Whether every dramatic interpretation of that rule survives scrutiny is one question, but the fact that commentators are focusing so intensely on the date tells you something else. People are no longer discussing the Sussex marriage merely as a romantic relationship. They are discussing it as a financial structure, and that is where the story becomes explosive.
I think personally, they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Harry has allegedly been making solo appearances while Meghan develops separate commercial projects. New business filings, independent income streams, and projects centered more heavily around Meghan's individual brand have fueled speculation that the architecture of their professional lives is becoming increasingly separate. Then came claims that the couple's finances are under severe pressure, with insiders alleging significant debt and leverage. Suddenly, the question is not simply, are Harry and Meghan happy? happy. It becomes much darker. Could they even afford to separate? More than 40 public appearances with an empty seat beside Meghan have been presented as another clue. To supporters, those absences may mean nothing. To critics, they look like a pattern, and patterns are exactly what fuel investigative gossip. One missed appearance is ordinary. Two can be coincidence. But when the empty chair keeps appearing, people start asking whether the chair is telling the story more clearly than the couple ever could. Tom Bauer's interpretation is particularly provocative because he has argued that the preparation for life beyond the marriage may have begun long before the public was ready to see it. The allegation is that Meghan was not simply building a career. She was building independence. And if that is true, the next question becomes unavoidable. Independence from whom? Then comes the prenup. According to the claims presented in this discussion, there is a specific clause on a specific page of Harry and Meghan's prenuptial agreement that could have enormous consequences. Page 14, Clause 7. 4 words allegedly sitting inside a document Harry supposedly signed without fully understanding the implications. If that claim is accurate, then the document that was supposed to protect the marriage financially could eventually become one of the most important weapons in a divorce battle. But there is another complication. The Netflix deal has been repeatedly placed at the center of the financial argument. A reported maximum value of around $100 million makes the number impossible to ignore. If contracts were executed during the marriage, the date they were signed could become crucial to any dispute over marital property. And while Harry's name remained attached to the Sussex story, Meghan was simultaneously developing projects that increasingly emphasized her own identity. That distinction could become everything, because if the marriage eventually collapses, the fight may not simply be over love, loyalty, or where the children live. It could become a battle over contracts, assets, income streams, business structures, legal fees, and who controls what was created during the marriage. And then, just when the financial story appears complicated enough, another allegation enters the room, one involving Meghan's reported birth year and the possibility that inaccurate identifying information could create an entirely different legal question. That is where this story takes its most controversial turn. The birth year allegation is where this entire story moves from financial speculation into territory that could have serious legal consequences if it were ever proven. Thomas Markle has reportedly made a statement claiming Meghan was born on August 4th, 1974, rather than the year generally reported publicly. That claim by itself does not prove that any legal document is invalid, and it certainly does not establish that a court would overturn a prenuptial agreement. But the allegation has become a dramatic talking point because legal contracts depend upon accurate identifying information. If there were ever a genuine documented discrepancy in foundational records, lawyers could investigate it and a court would ultimately decide whether it mattered. That distinction is crucial because an allegation repeated online is not the same thing as evidence accepted in court. The controversy becomes even more emotionally charged because Lady C has repeatedly contrasted Diana with Meghan, arguing that the two women could not be more different in compassion and empathy. Her criticism extends to Meghan's relationship with Thomas Markle, particularly around claims that Thomas Markle has faced serious difficulties while remaining estranged from his daughter. Again, those statements belong to the commentators making them, not to an established legal finding, but they feed directly into the larger narrative being constructed around Meghan, a woman accused by critics of cutting people out of her life whenever they no longer fit the direction she wants to take. Lady C then takes the story somewhere even more explosive. She has discussed a mysterious woman whom she says Harry has met, describing the two as being in love while carefully avoiding directly alleging a physical affair. That distinction matters because accusations concerning a married person's private conduct can carry legal consequences. Lady C's language was deliberately cautious, allowing the implication to hang in the air without making the precise accusation that could create greater legal exposure. The result was almost tailor-made for gossip. Nothing was formally proven, but the suggestion was powerful enough to ignite speculation. According to the account being circulated, Meghan allegedly discovered messages on Harry's phone and reacted with anger. That claim remains unverified, but the way it has been framed is revealing because critics interpret the alleged reaction not as heartbreak, but as fury over what the discovery could mean for the marriage, the public image, and the Sussex brand. And immediately, the memory of Diana returns. Her famous description of there being 3 people in her marriage has become one of the most recognizable phrases in the entire royal saga, so invoking it automatically turns a private allegation into a historical parallel. Harry's own childhood makes that parallel especially emotionally loaded. Harry was 7 when his parents' marriage became a public catastrophe and 12 when Diana died. He walked behind her coffin while cameras followed every step. He later built much of his public identity around the wounds left by that experience. The irony being suggested now is almost unbearable. After witnessing his parents' marriage collapse beneath relentless public scrutiny, Harry may once again find his personal life surrounded by the same questions about love, loyalty, money, and betrayal. And yet the financial pressure allegedly surrounding the couple creates another contradiction. If separating is so difficult financially, why would either side move first? Reports and commentators have claimed that the couple spend millions annually on private security while maintaining an extraordinarily expensive lifestyle. Their California property, business obligations, legal battles, and professional ventures all require money. A divorce would add lawyers, negotiations, property disputes, and potentially years of financial restructuring. So even if the marriage were deeply unhappy, leaving would not necessarily be simple. That is why the final twist may be the most revealing, the argument that Meghan herself could be trapped. Strip away Harry's royal connection and the question becomes brutally simple: what exactly remains of the Sussex brand without the Sussex connection? Before Harry, Meghan had an acting career, a lifestyle project, and a previous marriage. After Harry, she gained a global platform unlike almost anything she had possessed before. Critics argue that this makes Harry more than a husband. It makes him part of the infrastructure surrounding her public identity. That accusation becomes even sharper when former acquaintances describe Meghan as someone who allegedly removes people from her circle once they no longer serve her ambitions. Whether that characterization is fair is deeply disputed, but it fits perfectly into the story critics are now telling, that relationships, businesses, titles, and public appearances have gradually become pieces on a larger strategic board. And that leaves the audience with the question nobody can answer yet. Is this actually the beginning of the end for Harry and Meghan? Or is the internet connecting unrelated clues into one enormous conspiracy? The financial claims remain claims. The legal interpretations require lawyers and courts. The alleged messages remain unverified. The birth year controversy requires documentary evidence, not commentary. But one thing is undeniable. The story has reached a point where every empty seat, every separate project, every old PR connection, and every carefully chosen word is being examined as though it might reveal what the couple themselves refuse to say.